Hello and welcome to another NihongoGamer video, and it's another episode of Water Breaker. So this was posted on Twitter later in this week on Saturday, so it's going to be kind of Friday night for most of America and Europe. But in Japan, it will be on Saturday, 9 a.m. There's going to be a broadcast, a Japan fighting game maker roundtable. That's how they've translated this, Rengokai. By calling it a roundtable, I assume they're going to be discussing issues, not just announcing new things about their fighting games that are coming out, or DLC, or maybe new versions of games. I don't think that's the only reason. If they're going to be calling it a roundtable, I'm hoping they're going to actually be approaching a number of things that are big issues, like basically netcode. I just want them to talk about netcode. You may have heard this term before, but essentially, as fighting games, or because of the virus outbreak in 2020, it has become more and more clear that we need good netcode for games to run online. And especially when EVO announced all the games that were going to be in EVO 2020, they had to change all those games. And now EVO is not even happening, but that's a completely separate issue. They actually announced most of those games. Pretty much all of the main games got changed for like 4 completely different games, because the games that were announced on EVO for EVO 2020 didn't run well on the internet. And then the 4 games that they decided to go for in the end were like Skullgirls, Them's Fightin' Herds, Killer Instinct, which is like 7 years old now, and Mortal Kombat 11. And these games are fantastic games, but more importantly, they run well on the internet. And a lot of games, they like wait for you, like press the button, it goes through the internet, and you have to wait a while, and then the other person sends a button through the internet, and you're always like constantly waiting for each other before the game is allowed to move on. And as a result, the games kind of shudder and judder, and there's jitter and delay. But with rollback, you see your characters kind of teleporting backwards and forward, but it's like generally played at the same rate and speed without the sudden jitters and shudders that you might expect, or we've come to expect from Japanese fighting games. And I stress this is especially prevalent in Japanese fighting games. So whether they're actually going to talk a lot about netcode, I don't know. The only announcement that I have seen is that one of these companies, now you can see a large number of companies, a lot of famous people that you may recognize who are the producers, general producers and directors from SNK, from Arika, from Arc System Works, from Namco. Of these titles, the only one I know that has actually said they're going to be talking about netcode is this company here, that is making a game called Fighting EX Layer. So this is Nishitani, who I believe actually works on like Street Fighter 2. A lot of these, actually, I think a lot of these producers probably worked together in various companies and then moved off into separate companies. There's a lot of moving around in the industry, right? But apart from this company here, Arika, which makes Fighting EX Layer, I actually don't know who else is going to be talking about rollback netcode. And Arc System Works, even though they're putting rollback netcode into the new Guilty Gear game that's planned for 2021, and we've already played like a beta version of it on this channel, I don't know if they actually intend to speak about rollback at this particular event. In fact, I'm not 100% sure what they're going to be talking about at this event, so let's have a look through this article. It's an announcement by Bandai Namco Entertainment, but it's for this event on the 1st of August, happening at 9 a.m. Japan time. It's going to include the following companies: Arc System Works, Arika, which makes Fighting EX Layer, SNK, that makes all your favorite games like King of Fighters, Capcom, Street Fighter, Koei Tecmo Games makes Dead or Alive, Bandai Namco Entertainment, they make like all the other fighting games, you know, Tekken, Soul Calibur, Dragon Ball. Well, Dragon Ball's done by Arc System Works, but it's published by Bandai Namco Entertainment. Everybody's here. Remember that? Now, at the event itself, it says that the subject matter is games that are made and sold within Japan, and it's going to involve the producers and directors of those titles. Now, in this sentence, it actually says there's going to be talk, and the talk is going to be about questions that were submitted by users regarding eSports. Or I just want to add one little correction. It doesn't actually say the word questions. It actually says they're asking people to submit talk themes that they can use for the roundtable discussion, but it doesn't specifically say questions. And here it says, from Bandai Namco Entertainment, they're also going to be announcing stuff from Harada and also from Okubo, talking about Tekken 7. They're going to be talking about Soul Calibur 6, and from both titles, we'll get the latest information. I assume the event is kind of being held by or hosted by Bandai Namco Entertainment. In particular, it looks like they're going to be using this event to announce information about their titles. Now, at the event are a number of people that you're probably familiar with. Obviously, we've got Daisuke Ishiwatari. He's the developer of Guilty Gear. And I think the funny thing about this guy is he's always going to look 21. I'm pretty sure on the day he dies, he'll probably be like 300 years old, and the coroner will be like, age at death, 21. Looking at the Twitter account for Fighting EX Layer, you can actually see, and in fact, they've actually done a tweet in English. It says, on the day, Nishitani will be talking about the timing of the Fighting EX Layer netcode change. Now, personally, I think it's going to be difficult, and it's probably going to be very Japanese, where they may mention netcode, but they probably won't talk about it really directly, especially as not every company wants to implement rollback netcode. I mean, they've had 10 years to do it, and so far, of all the main games, Street Fighter V is the only one that's actually developed a form of rollback netcode of these Japanese developers. And in fact, Capcom has implemented rollback in Darkstalkers, the collection on PS3, and also for Third Strike, which is on PS3. But that was actually handled by Iron Galaxy, I think, which is a non-Japanese company. But as you can see, they are clearly saying that they're going to be talking about the timing of the netcode change for Fighting EX Layer. And I think it's unlikely that they're going to talk about how important rollback netcode is, because they don't want to put pressure in a public space, at a public roundtable. I don't think it's going to be like Arika saying, hey, Namco, you should put rollback in all your games. We're trying it. And I don't think it's going to be like Daisuke going, yeah, we've had great feedback about rollback. In fact, Capcom, you should just use GGPO instead of trying to make your own rollback. I doubt they're going to be speaking that openly to each other, even though that's the conversation that personally I'd like to see. Now, although it doesn't say on the website exactly what they plan to talk about, it does say here on the tweet that Street Fighter made a couple hours ago that regarding the talk themes, they're asking for you to suggest themes that you want them to talk about. So I assume that there's no way for them to escape a chat about netcode if everybody messages them and says you want them to talk about netcode, because it's really important, especially as it looks like there's no end in sight to the coronavirus issue, or rather there would be an end in sight, but just as a result of the way that we're handling the situation, it looks like the situation may never end. And with that in mind, we need to make sure that these games are playable and enjoyable and not stressful just because they're using netcode from over a decade ago, or netcode that's supposed to be rollback but doesn't work quite how we would expect it to. So regarding the producer and director and the talk themes that you want them to talk about, take this post and retweet it, please. So in fact, it's not just a comment to this post. You need to do a retweet that includes in the comment the thing that you want them to talk about. Currently, it looks like of the 60 or so, or the 70 or so retweets, only 12 of them actually have comments attached. And I haven't seen too many people actually speaking about what they want them to talk about. But just in case this post isn't in English, just remember that you can actually click, I don't have the button, for some reason it's not coming up on here, but you can actually click translate tweet and it will show you the tweet in English. If there's something you want them to talk about, you need to retweet this and add a comment. And just looking at the official Tekken 7 account as well, it's a very similar thing. It says, regarding the themes that you want them to talk about, it says, do a retweet with a comment attached. And for the themes that you want them to talk about, make sure you use this hashtag, Kakuge Rengokai, which means fighting game roundtable. And if you don't know how to spell that in Japanese, just copy and paste this part of the tweet, the hashtag, because that's how you're going to get their attention with your question that you want them to read. Just checking out the comments on this, on the comment GIFs on this tweet. The point is they're going to have a meeting and they're going to talk about stuff, and during this week, we still have about 6 days. We've got 5 days before the actual event to build up tweets on things that we actually really feel passionate about. And I really do feel like the one thing that needs to be pushed forward the most in 2020 is the netcode thing, because myself included, I definitely avoid certain games, games that I thought I enjoyed before, but just seeing and experiencing how games that play with functioning rollback netcode, it's just so difficult to get back into the fighting games that don't have it. It's just kind of, why bother when there are games that play better? And the answer will always inevitably come down to, oh, because I like the characters. Maybe Them's Fightin' Herds is a cool game, but it's got like 6 characters, and they're original characters. They're not characters I've heard of. But Ryu and Ken, those are characters I grew up with, and those are the characters I want to play in a game that functions well. So it's not that there are no other games that I can go and play. There's actually plenty of other games that I can play, but I don't play fighting games just because I like fighting games. I play certain fighting games because I enjoy those franchises. I'm a genuine fan of them. I'm a fan of Street Fighter, I'm a fan of King of Fighters, I'm a fan of Tekken, of Soul Calibur, of Dragon Ball, especially Dragon Ball, because that fandom came from before it was even a fighting game. I've enjoyed Dragon Ball as a TV show growing up, reading some of the manga, and then experiencing it as a fighting game as well. It's just, wow, it's so painful to be so close to these things, and yet I don't really want to get fully stuck into it, because the closer I get to it, the more I have to experience the netcode, and the more I experience the netcode, and the more it makes me dislike this thing that I used to like. Another thing that makes the netcode discussion quite difficult is that even though we don't want to force anyone to implement a type of netcode that maybe they're not familiar with, or for whatever reason they're just not used to it and they want it to be like the old way where the game just kind of slows down every now and then. Whatever it is that's causing them to have this preference, what it boils down to is that we're all kind of in this together. This is not the best-selling industry of all time. If you want to make a best-selling game, then if you get a famous actor, you get some dramatic story and some intense graphics, it's actually probably smarter to not make a fighting game. I'm pretty sure that whenever these companies make fighting games, especially Namco, especially SNK, especially Capcom, especially Arc System Works, all of them, I'm pretty sure that they do this out of passion for fighting games, because when you think about it, every other genre makes more sense to go and make a game for and make money out of, because fighting games are really punishing, and it is really difficult to get people to stay on board. And I'm pretty sure there actually was, if you go through the history, there was like a dark age when a large number of fighting games weren't really coming out, and it's like now that fighting games are quite popular right now, if we can grab the momentum by the reins and run with it rather than see fighting games disappear again for a number of years, nobody wants to see that. And so when people are yearning out for better netcode in these games, it's not because they're selfish and it's like, I want to play only Street Fighter and I want it to run well on the internet. That there's more to it. If the game doesn't run well, then it won't be popular, then Capcom won't make more money, and then Capcom can't make more games for us. So it's like selfish, but it's also for everyone. We're not doing it because we want you to do what we say. It's like, we want this because if you take this suggestion on board and make netcode more playable in your game, then you'll have more money to make more of your passion project games for us to enjoy. Everybody wins. Well, that's the theory anyway. I guess the other main thing that they plan to talk about that isn't netcode is eSports. And again, I'm no expert on the topic, but you can probably find some excellent resources on the internet about JESU, which is the Japan Esports Union. And as far as I'm aware, this thing exists because fighting games can't really give prize money away. You can't really give prize money away to people in a tournament where they pay entry, because then it sounds like it's gambling. I think under the current Japanese law, to pay entry to something so that you have a chance to take part in an activity that might give you, I don't know, $100,000 or $200,000. I guess in the eyes of the law in Japan, that still counts as gambling, and they can't really tell the difference. There's no change to the laws in that regard. And so anyone who wants to make more than, I can't remember, it's like if you make the prize money more than $500 or more than $1,000 or something, anything above that needs to be, you need a special Japan eSports Union license. And there's a very big discussion about that, but it's not controlled by a group that was voted in by people who have been in the scene for a long time. It's like a self-appointed group of people. And maybe for now, it benefits everyone to just get the license. But since that group wasn't appointed by the scene itself, I think there's confusion as to where it may go in the future. They could just choose that, oh, maybe they don't like this person, so they don't get a license. Or, oh, if you spoke to your boss and you worked for, I don't know, you work for Square Enix, and fortunately, I think Nemo spoke to his boss at Square Enix and they said, yeah, sure, you can continue competing in the game and, he has a license. But what if his boss said no? What if his boss was like, no, you're doing it on your own time, but I would like you to have your head completely in your work and not compete over the weekends. It's like, but it's my own personal time. But the way that the licensing system works, I think there are various people that you would have to get the okay from in order to get a license. So who appoints the people who hand out the licenses? I guess that was a very big discussion. In fact, there was a large, roundtable discussion about esports stuff. And that was when pretty much everyone was like, okay, whatever, we'll just take the license and so that we can get the prize money. And famously, I think Momochi, he's a very famous, very strong Street Fighter player, always strong at loads of fighting games. He was one of the main guys who was like, well, I'm going to refuse the license and it means I won't be able to receive money. But the principle is I don't like the idea that the group of people who are in charge of this much power regarding who can get money and who can get paid, why has that been appointed by this group who made them the kings? Again, please don't quote me on any of this. I'm completely going off just information that I've read on the internet and videos I've seen, and this is accumulated knowledge, but it's not. Do not quote this video when you talk about what's going on in Japan, because I don't genuinely know. This is just the gist I've got. So anyway, I think now going on 2.5 years after that roundtable conversation, because I think that was January 2018-ish, when they had that big discussion about the Japan Esports Union and the pro licensing system. I don't think I've seen a really big discussion about it since then. Now, since that event 2.5 years ago, I think Momochi has finally actually taken the pro license. I think he is supporting his family, he supports his own studio, he massively supports young gamers who are trying to find a viable way to become professional esports players, as in make this a career, not just play games and have fun and make money sometimes, like actually thinking of it as a legitimate career. But I guess in order to support all that, he does need to actually get the money every time he wins, because he keeps winning tournaments, and there was a time when he was only being given like the base amount of money that you're allowed to receive unless you get a license. But since then, I'm pretty sure he has taken the license. So it'll be a very interesting discussion to see now that pretty much all of the famous Japanese gamers that you've heard of, I'm pretty sure they all have this license now. I say all, but I mean the majority of them. What I don't think is going to be in the discussion is any sort of talk about trends in fighting games getting easier or more difficult. I really don't think that's what the point of this is. Like, I think that discussion would be far too wide. I think even if people discuss it, I don't think it'll get much time, because the creators of these games are working in such different areas. We've got 3D fighting games, 2D fighting games, we've got 2.5D games, and Street Fighters to Soul Calibur to Dragon Ball to King of Fighters. There's such different franchises that I don't think that I just don't see them talking about the fact that video games are getting easier, or video games in some ways are getting harder, or how are they managing that aspect of it. But if anything, really, all I want to say is that I think they're going to talk about netcode, or I want them to talk about netcode. I want you all to retweet these tweets that you see, and I want you to retweet with a comment, just saying netcode, or please talk about netcode, because I think in 2020, really, that is the most important aspect for these games, because I want them to survive. These Japanese companies, I think they want their games to survive, but they haven't gone the extra mile and made the games actually a fun experience online. They just kind of judder to a halt every time there's a spike in the Wi-Fi, and it's not consistent right now. Whether the game has a Wi-Fi indicator, or whether the game tells you the ping, which is like the speed of an information going to your opponent and then coming back to you. A large number of these things, maybe they don't need to be standardized, but it's so exciting that there's gonna be a talk, and that they're asking openly, what would you like us to talk about? Because in 2020, when so many people are staying at home, and when people are not staying at home, but we really wish they would stay at home, I feel like we need every possible incentive for people to not try to go out to public spaces to do things like play games, when it's already been solved. Playing these online games, but making them feel a bit closer to being offline, it feels like there's already a very good solution, and the majority of the games that you see here on this list are not actually involving any kind of rollback yet. The games by Arc System Works, BlazBlue and Guilty Gear, they don't yet involve rollback, but we're expecting it to have rollback for Guilty Gear Strive next year. And only this week did I realize, looking at Twitter, that Fighting EX Layer was actually doing a beta period where they were testing the game. I don't know if it actually used the new netcode or if they were just considering it, but as far as I'm aware, they're actually planning to talk about when they plan to release this new netcode update, which is fantastic. SNK, actually, they've already been putting rollback netcode into a bunch of their smaller games, but we haven't heard anything about King of Fighters 15. And I don't just mean the game itself, like the character roster and the graphics they're going to use or the fighting game systems. I just mean we have no idea whether it's going to use rollback netcode, despite the fact that Last Blade 2, which is a game from 1998, that got a rollback update. God of War Mark of the Wolves, that came out like around the same time, I think, and it got a rollback update. Pretty sure, I think Samurai Spirits also has rollback, but not Samurai Spirits, the new one, like the old retro game. That has rollback. I think maybe King of Fighters 97, I think they also did a version of that with rollback. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. But as you can see, SNK is clearly a company that's committed to putting rollback in their games, but the big question is like the main title, right? The one that is like the flag bearer for the company, the King of Fighters, the one that involves fighters from like every franchise that they've ever made. Will that have rollback? I don't know if they're going to announce it, but it would be fun to see SNK discuss it at least. Capcom, their main game does have rollback in it, but it famously doesn't work the same way that rollback does in games that do work. Street Fighter V, it has a sort of rollback, but it's always been kind of broken. And then they fixed it, and now the game kind of judders to a halt every time there's a spike in the Wi-Fi or just the internet in general. And I feel like maybe it didn't do that before. So even though they fixed some of the issues, I think in some ways the game has actually become less ideal. So it's like, it would be nice to see Capcom talking about using straight up normal GGPO netcode for, I don't know, a future Capcom fighting game. Because as far as I'm aware, GGPO, the license is free. They're using what's called like the MIT license. I don't exactly know how it works. Obviously, retrofitting an old game that's already been released, that's probably much more difficult. But, hopefully they'll speak about new fighting game projects. Dead or Alive 6, this is a big title, and they're on the 6th one. That doesn't have rollback. Tekken famously doesn't have, there was a tweet where Harada was convinced that the game already does have rollback, but I think we pretty much realized that he's talking about something slightly different. And Soul Calibur 6, pretty sure it doesn't have rollback either. I guess one of the most exciting things about this event is that Japan famously likes to just make what they make without too much input from outside. And maybe that's the reason why Japanese fighting games are so strong, why the characters are so strong, why the franchises are so powerful. Like, even though the netcode isn't great, we keep buying the game and playing it anyway. That's a testament to how powerful it is. So it's interesting to see them so open, on their personal accounts, asking you to retweet with comments about what you want them to talk about. Interestingly, it says themes. It doesn't actually say questions. So they're not going to be answering questions specifically, but they are open to incorporating your suggestions into their talk themes, which is how they've phrased it. but it's looking very, very positive to see an event where so many of your favorite franchise producers and developers are coming together and openly asking for your input. A week of it. You've got a week to retweet and comment with what you'd like them to speak about and have a big influence on Japanese fighting game producers, which is like just generally doesn't happen. It's usually Japan does whatever Japan does. Well, not the country, but I mean the Japanese fighting game producers, they want to make what they want to make. And if the West doesn't like it, so what? Okay, the game doesn't sell so much. Okay, and then there's a dark age and we can't make fighting games for a while. They're kind of like, whatever. We just, if it has to fail, it has to fail. But at least we got to make what we wanted to make. But clearly they feel like the scene might be in some sort of crisis, or there's some reason why there's a need to talk about esports and hopefully talk about netcode, because if it's not handled correctly, then for esports, it could just be a massive failed opportunity or missed opportunity to get really, really big. I think esports, we've seen how big it is for other genres, and pretty sure in Japan, I think the biggest esport probably is fighting games. So clearly that discussion is important. But in 2020, with the virus situation, I really do think that talking about netcode is so important. It's so important. Again, not just because I want the game to feel nice because I play a lot of fighting games, but because I think people ought to have a good experience. If they're new players getting into fighting games, or we suggest to people, hey, you should get into fighting games, they're like, okay, yeah, I'll buy it, I'll play it online. You're like, please don't play it online. Please don't play it online. Or if you play it online, please don't judge it by the online, because it's actually a really good game if you play it offline. But we'll never be able to show them until 2021, hopefully when the virus situation has calmed down a little bit. So if the scene is going to, 1, survive, or 2, expand, then getting people to experience or have a good experience, I think that's going to be really important. And certainly the netcode is part of that. There's clearly more though. There's the fact that sometimes the screen just makes you feel really rubbish, but I've talked about that in previous videos. I think that experience of losing is important, but I think there are ways that they could soften the blow. But I don't think that's what this discussion is about. It's not about games being too hard or too easy. Clearly, they think there's important stuff that needs to be talked about, and they want your input. So go ahead, do the retweet with comment, and give them the themes that you want them to talk about. Clearly, they're not asking for specific questions because they don't want the pressure of having to answer the questions, but they're open to seeing what themes you want to talk about and then using that as part of their roundtable discussion. Anyway, that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Just wanted to chat about what I think of this event. You can see that I'm very passionate about them talking about certain topics and what I probably think they won't be talking about. I'm pretty sure this is about esports, and ideally, if we talk about it enough, they'll probably mention netcode as well. And there's some announcements from Tekken 7 and Soul Calibur, so maybe they'll talk about, I don't know, DLC or new games, or who knows, maybe Tekken Cross Street Fighter? Is it time? Is it time? Don't get your hopes up. If you're not subscribed to the channel already, click that subscribe button, and I stream on Twitch, so there's a link below. If you haven't checked out a Twitch stream before, it's a good way to enjoy NihongoGamer style content, but with the ability to get into the chat and actually ask me questions directly, and I can answer you quickly, and we can go on from not just one-way conversations, but into actual discussions about things. It's good fun. I do it maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And there's also Discord, so if you haven't joined the Discord and you want to chat with other people who are fans of the channel, do join us on the Discord. Link is below for that. I'll see you in the next NihongoGamer video.